Hi everybody, John Adams here with your property tax reduction webinar, online webinar course for 2018. This week we're going to cover perhaps the most important topic of all, and that is value, real property valuation. Now, books have been written on this subject. People have spent careers on valuation. Our good friend Scott Murphy at DS Murphy and Associates has literally made a career out of trying to understand what constitutes market value. And yet you and I are supposed to figure it out in the next hour. Well, I'm going to cover some real highlights here. What you don't know is I'm going to send an email to Scott and ask him if he would be willing to do a quick video with me and let him talk about it from an appraiser's standpoint. I'm not an appraiser. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an accountant. I'm a real estate investor just like you. I'm a landlord. I'm a property owner, and I don't want to pay more than my fair share of taxes. And so this gives rise to the question, what is value? And all I can tell you is we're going to dive into it right now, and I'm going to share with you everything I've learned in the last 40 years of protesting and appealing property valuations before meeting with both the good folks that work in the county tax assessor's office, and frankly, I have had more success in dealing with them than I have had in dealing with boards of equalization. But I'll share with you what I know, and I think you'll find this extremely helpful. My advice is to take notes, and my advice is to jot down any questions you have and shoot them to customer care at money99.com. But I think you'll find most of your questions are going to be answered in this video, okay? So, first I need to let's go back here. I need to let you know I'm not an attorney. This is copyrighted information. Please don't share it with anyone that has not paid for it. And if you have any question as to whether or not you should be watching it, call me at 404-373-6000, and I will let you know whether or not you have paid to see this. Real quickly, we talk about 5 different areas in our property tax reduction workshop. This is just a reminder. We talk about ad valorem taxation. We are taxed at value. We talk about the property tax return, which is the PTR-50 form, which is filed between January 1st and April 1st every year. We talk about the notice of assessment, which is mailed after April 1st by each of the 159 counties in Georgia. I'm aware that it makes it difficult when we don't know when that notice of assessment is coming. If you have a question, call your tax assessor's office. They will know when they mailed, they will know when the due date is. Once they have mailed the notice of assessment, whether it gets to you or not is beside the point. We're right here at this point, yeah. Whether it gets to you or not, from the date they claim they mailed it, you have 45 days to file an appeal. And you should file that appeal, and you want to appeal that to the Board of Equalization. Now, once your appeal is certified, which happens at the end of the 45-day period, it's likely to be another 3, 6, 9, 12 months before you get to the Board of Equalization, which gives you lots of time to sit down with your assessor and look at the information they have, look at the information you have. Don't share your information with them. Just take all of theirs, okay, and find ways to combat it. Make them an offer if you'd like to at that point. But if not, or if they refuse to cooperate or accept your offer or make a good offer to you, then go straight to the Board of Equalization. And the Board of Equalization will be you'll have 10 minutes to present your side. We talked about that in, I think that was, I don't know which chapter. It was Module 3, I think, or something. Let me just look real quick and see. Board of Equalization was Module 3. So if you are preparing for a Board of Equalization hearing, not only do you need to study this section on value, but also listen to the full hour-long presentation on meeting with your Board of Equalization. Now, we talked about ad valorem tax, fair market value. What is fair market value? It is an estimate of the market value of a property based on what a knowledgeable, willing, and unpressured buyer would probably pay to a knowledgeable, willing, and unpressured seller. Okay? So, and this is after a full exposure to the market. And that typically takes 60 to 90 days is what we think of as a full exposure to the market. This is in contrast, of course, to foreclosure. But what we're trying to find out is, what was it worth on January 1st of the year in question? What was the market value? I hesitate to say fair market value because a lot of the appraisal community has now dropped the word fair. It's simply market value, okay? What it's really worth is a moving target. It's hard for us to really know exactly what something might have sold for, but trust me, the county's going to come up with a number. Now, the first thing you need to know is they probably have not seen your house ever. Now, it's possible they've driven by and looked at it from the street, but it's much more likely that they received a card when the house was built, they put it in the file that's now been computerized, and they just do this computer-assisted mass appraisal. It's called CAMA, and they don't really know anything about your house. So this is where your knowledge and your expertise can come in and help you save money. So, and remember that an evaluation is in the eye of the beholder in most cases. So, for example, here, let me just show you here. This is funny. This is your house as seen by you. It's a perfectly nice little brick house. It's 1.5 story, and you've enjoyed living there. Nice green lawn. This is the house as your buyer sees it. It is a shack. It's still livable, but it's a shack. This is the house as your lender sees it. That's called a non-conforming use, and they won't make a loan on it for some reason. I don't know. You can't loan money on a shoe, I guess. This is what your appraiser sees when you call him out. The whole thing is a wreck. It's just a disaster. And then finally, this is what the tax assessor thinks your house looks like. And of course, that's Biltmore Estate, Commodore Vanderbilt's home in Asheville, North Carolina. Beautiful home. If you've never been there, find a reason to get there, okay? So, to appeal a higher value, we have to find logical reasons why our particular parcel did not appreciate like the rest of Georgia. And remember, we talked about earlier that it's going to hurt us that in 2017 property values did go up, and they went up substantially, between 10 and 15%, depending on who you believe. So we're not concerned about reality. We are concerned about finding comparable sales that will prove without a question that our home was not worth what they claim it was worth on January 1st. Okay, you got it? That's the goal. So let's pretend we're playing poker. The easiest way to win at poker, if you're playing somebody else, is to find out what their cards they're holding. And fortunately, we have a way of doing that. So let's begin by talking about approaches to value. The first and most important, and the one you need to focus on, is the comparable sale method. The second is the replacement or the cost method. The third is the income method. And these are the three approaches to value. Now, why do I tell you this when I say the only one that really matters is the comparable sale method? It's to make you look and sound more knowledgeable when you're talking with the county appraiser or when you're talking with the Board of Equalization. You should always say In my analysis of the value of the home on January 1st, I used all three approaches to value. Let's go through them. The first was the comparable or the sales comparison approach to value. And this is the most important one, but you should also mention, and we're going to talk in just a few minutes about the replacement or the cost method and then the income method, neither of which are important, but you need to mention that you looked at those methods and that they were not applicable in this situation. It just makes you sound like you know what you're talking about, okay? So here we go. The sales, this says a comparable sale, this says a sales comparison approach. It also is sometimes called the comparable sale method. The most frequently used and accepted approach to determining value in residential real estate is the sales comparison approach to value. This approach to value bases its opinion of value on what similar properties, these are known as comparables, or you begin using the word comps. I need to get some comps on this. And in the real estate industry, we use that word a lot, comps, C-O-M-P-S. What similar properties or comps in the vicinity have sold for recently. These properties are adjusted, write this down, for time, acreage, size, amenities, and we're going to talk about more as to what constitutes comparable in a second. But for right now, understand we're taking these comps and we're going to compare them to the property that's being appraised. We call that the subject property. You need to be writing these words down. So you should already know what comps are, and you should now know what the subject property is. Our goal is to have comparable 1 or comp 1, comp 2, comp 3, and the subject. That is your presentation to the Board of Equalization. That is your presentation to the tax assessor's office, and we're going to show you now what is involved in doing that. Understanding which and to what extent adjustments are reasonable for a given market area or a given property relies on the experience of the appraiser. So, for example, we've got two houses that are identical, and one just sold for $100,000, and the one next door, which is identical, is about to go on the market. What's it worth? Well, obviously, it's worth $100,000. Whoops! It has a full basement. It's not finished, but it is a full daylight basement, but it nonetheless is below grade. So it does have a door walking out the back of them. By the way, this is a very, very typical case of trying to make adjustments. The houses are identical. They were built at the same time. The lots are almost identical, but one has a full basement, one does not. How do we adjust that? We have a positive adjustment. We're going to adjust upward by $20,000 because we think the full basement is, in today's market, worth $20,000. Now, how do I know that? Well, that's based on my experience. I'm not a licensed appraiser, but I am a broker, and I've been around the block, and I think people would pay an extra $20,000 to get a full basement. I know I would. And so you make these adjustments, and we're going to talk later about adjustments to comparables. We're either going to go up or down based on the areas of dissimilarity with the subject. So if they're nicer than the subject, we're going to have a negative adjustment. If they are inferior to the subject, we're going to have a positive adjustment to get to the valuation of our property. See what I'm saying? Okay. Margie, any questions?
No, this is really cool.
I made Margie sit in the background so I could take a drink of Coke every now and then. Okay. Here we go. Well, we don't have any breaks on this thing. All right, here we go. So what is comparable? Here are the things I want you to focus on. Now, if we were talking to Scott Murphy, he would say we're going to bring up 57 points of comparison. We're not going to get into 57 points of comparison. We're going to deal with these 5 because I think these are the ones that are most likely to persuade a county worker. And remember, most of these county guys that call themselves appraisers, they're not Georgia licensed appraisers. Now, they're good guys, and they're not breaking the law. They have a right to call themselves appraisers, but that's because they're doing it for the county, and they are appraising property for the county, but they don't, a lot of them, most of them, do not have a license in Georgia. Yes, they have training in estimating value, but so do you. You bought this course, so you're on a level playing field with them. Additionally, when you make your presentation before the Board of Equalization, none of those guys are appraisers. I mean, it's possible that they accidentally are, but usually they're not. And so you need to be focused on what's going to persuade people. Let's look at the points of comparison I want you to focus on. Number one is proximity. Proximity is how far is this comp from the subject property. Ideally, we would like 3 identical homes within 1 mile of the subject property within 1 year of January 1st, going backwards, which means we're looking at, since this is tax year 2018, we're looking at 2017. You got it? Okay. So that's proximity. Now, well, I mean, that's obviously what the things we'd like for comparables to be. Well, we're not going to find that. It's very unlikely that you're going to find 3 sales that are all perfect comps. And if you do, that's wonderful. But, you know, the next thing is you're going to find high comps, low comps, and middle of the road comps. So we'll get to that later. But proximity, we want everything that has sold within a mile. We want to look at everything during the previous calendar year. Okay? That's proximity. If we need to, we'll go farther out. If we have to, we'll go as much as 1.5 miles. The farther you go from the subject property, here's how to use the language to use, the less confidence we have in using it as a comparable. You hear that? The farther the comparable is from the subject property, the less confidence we have, or the less weight it carries as a comparable. So we can weight our comparables. So we can say, this one's really good, but we need to take into consideration these two, even though they're not as good. Okay? So let's forge ahead. Next is age and style. This is important. You don't want to try to compare a ranch house that is 1 floor, okay, with a 2-story, a Dunwoody 54, something like that. That's not going to make any sense, and those are very dissimilar styles. Likewise, you don't want to compare a house that was built in 1937, like my house, with a house that was built in built in 2017, which is now a year old, unless the house that was built in 1937 has been completely and totally renovated. Now, I live over here by Druid Hills near Emory, and the whole rage in my neighborhood now is to take these 1930s houses, gut them on the inside, blow out the back, put in all new everything, heating, air, new kitchen, new floors, new all manner of everything, and then sell them. And these houses are selling for $1 million. They're actually selling for more than new construction of the same size and sort of design, because they can say, well, this house was built in 1937. Okay? All I'm telling you is, if the age of the house is not its effective age, in other words, if it's all been updated and it looks brand new and it functions as brand new, and if it's all brand new and it all functions as new, it might as well be new, okay? So don't let that part of age scare you. Style, I would really like a comparable style to be a comparable style. Now, this is we're down to the two most important parts of what's comparable. Bedroom and bath count. This is a biggie. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath house is not the same as a 3-bedroom, 1 house. It's not the same as a 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath house. Okay? And this is a big deal. If you have a comp that works for you, but you're trying to compare a 3.2 with a 3.1.5, you can bet that the appraiser for the county is going to object. And you need to be able to come back and say, yeah, well, guess what? That half bath it has the room to be expanded very easily, and I have an estimate that would cost about $4,000. So I've made a $4,000 adjustment there, but this is essentially a 3.2. The space is there, the plumbing is there, it's all been stubbed. I'm just making this up as I go. But my point is, please try not to compare a 3.1 with a 3.2 or a 3.2.5 or vice versa, because you're just going to get blown out of the water. Let's move down to square footage. This is the holy grail of appraisal. If you don't write down anything else, write down bedroom, bath count, square footage, and date of sale. When we talk about square footage, we talk about heated above ground living, heated and cooled above ground living space. We'll talk about that more in just a second. And then date of sale. We're only going, because we want to know what the house was worth on January 1st, we're only going to be looking at sales that occurred in the 12 months immediately preceding January 1st. Now, what if you've got a great comp, but it's 14 months old? I would go ahead and include it and simply state to everybody, I understand that this comp is a little bit old, so I have made a time adjustment based on what the Case-Shiller index shows values in this area going up. And I've adjusted it up 5.6% according to Case-Shiller. Now, they're all going to say, wait a minute, that's over a year old, and you should come back and say, well, there aren't very many decent comps, and this is an excellent comp, and I believe it to be indicative of value as of January 1. So maybe you'll win, maybe you won't, okay? Boop, skip that. So let's talk about a market value appeal. This is what remember I told you always to appeal based on market value, or actually just value and uniformity. Under where it says basis for appeal, don't ever check anything else. Just value and uniformity. We'll talk about uniformity later. Under a value appeal, what we're saying is the property will not sell for the assessed value. And our market value trend hurts because during 2017, values went up. And they've been continuing to go up in 2018, but it doesn't matter because our value was frozen as of January 1 as far as taxes are concerned, right? Okay. Because the market value trend is going to hurt us, you can bet that the county is going to bring that up and say, well, I'd like to point out that the Case-Shiller index shows that values were up 13.3% in the metro Atlanta area. You need to be able to counter that by saying that's all well and good for the metro Atlanta area. It does not speak to this neighborhood. And let's talk, I'm going to ask the board or ask the assessor or the appraiser to stay away from broad measures like that because they have absolutely no value in looking at property values in this neighborhood. Let's focus on the area we have at hand. Now, you can be sure if market value was helping us, I'd bring it up. But guess what they're going to say? Well, that has nothing to do with your neighborhood. So remember, there's no reason you can't use whatever helps in your argument, okay? Foreclosures, or more importantly, foreclosure resales help. If you can find during 2017 where an investor or a bank or somebody like that sold a home that they had acquired during foreclosure at a really reduced price, that's going to help you immensely. Now, the county is going to point out that's a distressed sale. You should respond, no, I'm sorry, it is not a distressed sale. It is an arm's length transaction. Now, we can't say that a foreclosure is an arm's length transaction because it's not. That is an involuntary alienation is what it's called. It means the property was taken away from you. But when the bank takes ownership of the property and then resells it, as they often do, that is an arm's length transaction. And that sale, if it's low, can really help you, okay? Also, look for errors on the property record card. One of the first things you should do in January is ask if you can meet with your appraiser to take a look at the property record card as well as all the comps that they're going to be using to come up with value. Whatever it takes, your job is to find a reason and prove your case before the Board of Equalization. We're going to be looking at comparable sales only. So what are these comparable? Proximity, age and style, bedroom bath count, square footage, and date of sale. Stick to those. Let's look at them one by one, okay? Look at these houses. If we're trying to assess the value of this one and this one sold for $50,000 last year, what would you guess the value of this one was on January 1st? $50,000. That's right. And this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. They're all identical, and the proximity is adjacent to each other. Look at them. I mean, they're just cookie cutters. Same thing over here. These are different than these, but they're all identical, and that makes it really easy to estimate value, all right? So we're looking again at what's comparable. Well, first let's talk about proximity in a little more detail. How close is this sale to the subject? If it's in the same block, it's best. I'd love to have the house on either side adjoining the property sell within the previous year because we would have some great comps. Unfortunately, they might hurt you. If it's sold for a lot, that's going to be bad, okay? So we want to discredit those to some degree, and we'll find a way. But same block would be best. Same neighborhood is okay. Nearby neighborhood is usually acceptable. 1 mile radius from the subject property is sort of considered a benchmark, although there's nothing magic about 1 mile. You get 1.2 miles, sure. If you need comps, drag it in and mention in your discussion of the comp that it's 1.2 miles from the subject, but it was felt that it was indicative of value and is included as an informational comp. I see that all the time. Watch out for the county who will try to say to you, well, that home is not in the tax neighborhood. What the hell is a tax neighborhood? Somebody just made up this phrase called tax neighborhoods. One day they were sitting around with nothing to do and had a bunch of yellow markers, and they just took the maps and circled a bunch of areas and says, okay, these here are the tax neighborhoods, so let's try to keep comparables in that. Forget it. If they try to bring up tax neighborhood, say, I don't know anything. I looked on the legal description and I didn't see anything about the tax neighborhood. And it's also appraisers don't use tax neighborhoods. So you need to totally discredit that if it hurts your case. Okay. Now, if you can use tax neighborhoods to discredit one of their comps, that's very different. But anything that is more than 2 miles away is certainly questionable. And as you can see, some houses are almost impossible to estimate the value of. And you may have to reach farther. That's called reaching. When an appraiser brings in a comparable that's just out of the blue, it may be 5 miles away, it's because he can't find anything else, and he is reaching for a comparable. What that means is we have less confidence in that comparable, and it is probably less indicative of value, but it's all we could find. All right, are you beginning to talk the lingo here? Good. I'm trying to make this thing work. Here we go. Age and style. I want it to be in a similar age range, at least in terms of functionality. Okay? So like we talked about a 1937 house that had zero functional obsolescence, meaning it's in perfect condition, would be similar to new construction. Does that make sense? Okay. So be careful of age. Age is less important when the property has been updated. And that would be all new systems, kitchen, bath, floors, everything perfect. Heat and air, the whole 9 yards, all the plumbing replaced, 200 ampere service, all of that stuff. All right. Similar style construction would certainly be nice. Now, if it's not, and it's a great comp for you, go ahead and throw it in, but be prepared. Somebody's going to say, wait a minute, yours is a ranch and that's a 2-story. Those are not comparable at all. Well, that's when you need to say, well, I understand that, but at the same time, it is a comparable sale. It is a recent sale and one that is indicative of values in this neighborhood. So, you get what you can. Let's look at the split foyer versus split or basement. This is great. I've got pictures of this. Bedroom and bath count should be similar to the subject. We talk about functional obsolescence. How functionally obsolescent, if a house was fully functional when it was built and today is not, a house built in 1937 could be fully functional if it had 4 bedrooms and 1 bath. That was typical in 1937. You didn't have 4 bedrooms and 4 baths. Nobody did that. I'm over here in Druid Hills. A lot of the houses were built without driveways because in the 1920s and 30s, not everybody had a car. You didn't need a car. You could take the trolley down to Atlanta. So if that has been changed, if somebody's come back and added 2 more baths, it doesn't matter that it was built in 1926 if it's 3 bedroom, 2 bath. Okay, we talked about that. All above grade. We're going to talk about that in a second. It needs to be, your comparables need to be typical of the market area. If you try to drag in a comp that is so off the wall, I mean, it doesn't look like anything else in the neighborhood. It isn't anywhere near in size. I mean, it's a McMansion. It's complete. They're just going to blow it out of the water and say this is not a comparable sale. That doesn't mean you shouldn't use it. Just be prepared for pushback. A bedroom is a minimum of 10 by 10 with a closet and a window. So if it isn't 10 by 10 and it doesn't have a closet and it doesn't have a window, be prepared for them to try to shoot it down. And each bedroom has to have direct access to bath facilities. In other words, you can't have a bedroom where you have to walk through another bedroom to get to the bath. Okay? So let's move on. Square footage. This is the holy grail. Dum, 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 dum. Very important you pay attention. We're focusing on, and this is another term, a buzzword you need to use. What is the gross living area? The gross living area is the heated, cooled, above grade space in the house. Now, write this down, back up the tape, and listen to this again and again and again until you understand it. If any part of a floor is below grade, meaning if you drilled through the wall at its lowest point and it was underground, then that entire floor is considered below grade. You're saying, wait a minute, that's not right. I have full finished basement. It's beautiful. There are 3 bedrooms and 2 baths down there. I understand that. You're going to get credit for that, but not at the same rate as if it was above grade. I'm just telling you, that's the way they do it. And you're going to run into this. So I'll say this about that fully finished basement, parts of which are below grade. And you keep screaming, wait a minute, every bedroom has windows. Okay, I'm glad every bedroom has windows, but the reality is if any part of that floor is below grade, then that entire floor is considered below grade. Now, if it's finished to the same grade as the rest of the house, you may get 90% of the square footage value because it's below grade, but they are going to take some percent off because below grade gross living area is not considered as desirable as above grade living area. And they separate it like that. So if you think your house has 2,000 square feet, it's a 1,000 square foot ranch with a full finished basement, which a portion of which is below grade, they're gonna say this is a 1,000 square foot house. Now, likewise, here's where you can turn that around. If the property record card, or if the county says that same house, 1,000 square foot ranch with a full finished basement, if they say you have 2,000 square feet, and any portion of that basement is below grade, or if you can make it below grade, then you can go in and say, wait a minute, this says I have 2,000 feet. I don't. I only have 1,000 square feet above grade. What I've got is a full finished basement, but it's below grade, and everybody knows that's not the same value. They also consider functionality. Is it functional? Did you, when you finished out that basement, does it look and feel and smell like a basement, or does it look and feel and act like a regular part of the house? And they never count attic or unfinished basement or garage space. It's just not counted as part of the living area, okay? Unfinished. So let's move along, but this is a very important point when calculating your square footage. So let's talk about how we calculate price per square foot. We take the adjusted selling price, okay? And what do I mean when I say, let's say we're looking at a comparable sale, and the comparable sale is 1,000 square feet, heated and cooled, above grade, above ground. It's got it has no basement. And it sells for $100,000. And it's 1,000 square feet. That is, $100 a foot, because it is sold for $100,000 and it has 1,000 square feet. So that's $100 a square foot. And $100 a square foot for an older house is still a bargain today. I mean, things are selling for $200 and $300 a foot. So that's your dollars per square foot. There's $100 per square foot. Now, if you've got three comparable sales, you would take the average of the dollars per square feet. So, for example, if you had three of them, and let's say one was 100, one was 120, and one was 97, you would average those three, which would be about 105, I'm guessing, and then you multiply that average dollars per square foot by the subject property's square footage, heating and cooled above ground only. That's how you come up with price per square foot. Now, adjusted sales price means, let's say it's sold for $100,000, but you happen to know that $5,000 was included to pay for closing costs, or closing costs and discount points. Okay, those are funds that are used to pay for non-real estate items. There's nothing wrong with it as long as it's disclosed and the lender goes along with it. But when we're using it as a comparable, if we find out that there were concessions, these are called concessions, that should be used to adjust the sales price, we do that, and we call it adjusted selling price. Unless it hurts our case, in which case we forget about it. Okay? If it sounds like I am being two-faced or duplicitous here. I am. I want you to do whatever it takes to make your case. So, but you need to be aware of these things. So that's price per square foot. Got it? So look at this. This is a split foyer house. There are a million of these all over Atlanta. They were very popular in the 1980s and early into the 90s. And so what you've got is up here is you walk in, there's a foyer. You can either go up or down. If you go down, you've probably got 2 bedrooms over here and a half bath or a full bath probably back there somewhere, and maybe a den that goes the length of the property or something like that, okay? If you go up, you have 2 more bedrooms, another full bath, a kitchen back over here, and this is a living room, dining room combo or something like that, okay? So you've got a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house. Well, how many square feet do we have? That's a 1,000 square foot house, but it has a full finished lower level that is finished to the same degree and has exactly the same functionality. And so we should not try to convince anybody this is a 2,000 square foot house. It's not. Instead, what it is a 1,000 square foot split foyer with 1,000 fully finished feet below it. And I would apply dollars per square foot up here at 100% and dollars per square foot down here at about 95%. And I think that would make sense. Okay? But you can't say that's a 2,000 square foot house because it's not. Is that the same thing as this? Look at that. There is a 2,000 square foot ranch style house. Now, is this going to be the same value as the split foyer? No, this is going to be worth much more because it's 2,000 feet on one level, and if this is 4 bedrooms, 2 bath, this would be a much more desirable house on the market. How do I know that? Because I've been in the real estate business a long time. But you can't compare apples to oranges. Okay? Let's take it another step. What if this 2,000 square foot ranch had a full 2,000 square foot basement, but it was unfinished? Well, that's still a 2,000 square foot house. Now it's on a full unfinished basement. How much value are we going to give that full unfinished basement? Well, 2,000 square feet, I'm going to give it probably $30,000, but not nearly as much as I would give to this lower level, which is finished to the same degree and the same functionality as this upper level. See what I'm saying? Okay, so I just wanted to cover the importance of square footage because these appraisers really like to hang their hat on that. And if you can use it to show them that your comps are better than theirs based on square footage, they're going to fold like a deck of cards. All right, let's now go back to date of sale. This is another area of comparison. The common practice among county appraisers is to use the prior calendar year only. That is not statutory. And what I mean by that is that there's no reason you can't go back more than a year. Just know that the farther back you go, if you keep reaching back in time, if you go to a year and 6 months, you are in ancient history as far as real estate values are concerned. And at 2 years, they're just going to start laughing and say, that was 2 years ago. Well, if that's all you got, use it. But boy, I'd like you to find something else. Because if it's more than a year and 2 or 3 months, it's really considered history. It needs to have occurred in the calendar year previous to the tax year we're talking about. So in our case, we're talking about January 1 of this year. You're looking at sales in 2017. The more recent, the better. Now, if you've got a progression, that can show a trend. And if you have some sales that have occurred since January 1st, I would introduce those not as an indication of value, but as an indication of a continuing trend. So let's say you had a sale of a very similar property on January 5th that showed a relatively low value and you wanted to use that. I would say, I am aware that this occurred afterward. However, it is an excellent comparable sale, and the fact that it is so close and that it shows a trend of value in the area requires its consideration. Okay? Now, under contract does not count. You can present it, but they're just going to say anybody will make any kind of offer on anything, and that doesn't mean it's worth that. That's not an indication of value, and the reality is they're right. Under contract really does not count. You still can present it if you need to. And the same thing for listing. If they try to say, well, look at their 4 homes listed for twice as much in this neighborhood, you need to say, hey, who cares what they're listed for? The listing price of a home is just what somebody's asking, and these people have clearly lost their mind. It's a free country. They can ask what they want. They're not going to get it. Well, let's stick to the facts, okay? So do you see how we use this to bolster our position? All right, here we go. What about condition? All right, and if this is the condition of your property, I would strongly encourage a home visit. This is what we call functional obsolescence. The home can no longer be used as a home. I mean, frankly, look, if there are holes in the roof, this is collapsed, the house is just about to fall down, it is unsafe for human occupancy, yes, I would bring that to their attention. But if your house is simply a mess or it's ugly, that's your fault. That's not the house's fault. And it's not going to account much for value. Use it to your benefit if you can. If you can say that, well, that comp was fully renovated, brand new fresh paint, everything was in perfect condition, whereas my home is in very poor condition, yes, that's legitimate, but it's just not a lot of value, okay? Remember we said what's comparable? Proximity, age, style, bedroom, bath count, square footage, date of sale. And we've talked, that's our 3 approaches to value where we talked about the comparable sale method. You want to take into account all 5 of those areas. So, what about uniformity? Well, here's what the law says. The rule of taxation shall be uniform and equitable. And what that means is that the tax is uniform when it operates with the same force and effect in every place where the subject of that law is found. Uniformity means that all property belonging to the same class will be taxed in the same manner. So let's say, and let's go back, I may have it somewhere, I don't know. Just remember that picture of the neighborhood I showed you? I'll try to find it real quick. Where all the houses were exactly there. There it is. Zoop. Uniformity, here's the deal. You see, these are 1-story and these are 2-story. So this is not comparable to this. But all of these are comparable and all of these are comparable. So let's say that this is your house here and the county comes back and says it's worth $200. And you agree that it's worth $250, quite frankly, and you're saying, wow, I don't want to appeal that on the basis of value because there have been sales elsewhere in the neighborhood of identical houses for $250,000. But interestingly, all around you, everybody's at $100,000. And you're saying, well, look, I know mine's worth $200, so I'm not objecting on the basis of value, but why is mine $200 when this guy's only $100? Why is mine $200 when this guy's, which it's an identical house, is only 100? Why is mine 200 when this guy's, these haven't sold, but they're identical homes or very similar based on the information we know about them, and yet my home is taxed at a much higher rate? Why? And they can't use value to prove that, because you're asking a question about uniformity. Are the tax laws being applied uniformly to all properties in this area? And the answer is no. In your situation, there is no uniformity. You're being taxed over here at $200,000 when these people are being taxed at 100, 100, 100, 100, and 100. And there ain't no justice. And so you are raising two issues when you appeal. You're appealing first on the basis of value, if you think you have a case of value. And if you don't have a case on value and you know it, then you also checked uniformity, and you can go in there with your guns blazing by checking on your neighbor's assessments. Remember, all of this information is public information. So if you live at 101 Oak Street, and this is 102 Oak Street right here, all you got to do is go to the county database and look up 102 Oak Street, and it'll say the assessment for 2018 is $100,000, and there's your ammunition. Now, I want you to know this. If you do that, you'll win in the Board of Equalization if you've got that situation. But the next year, this whole neighborhood will be flagged for reassessment. But you'll get 1 year, and you'll be locked in for 2 additional years. So your neighbors are going to be very unhappy with you, because they're all going to be appraised or assessed for $200,000 next year, and you're locked in at 100 for a 3-year period. Okay? That's the name of that too. That's what uniformity is all about. We talked about all this condition. Okay, we talked about uniformity. Lack of uniformity ignores value. That's the point. This is the slide I was looking for. And what if value is not on your side, see if you have a case to argue lack of uniformity. Every one of these houses should be identically valued. Look at them. By the way, I think this is China. I'm not sure. Only China would do something like this. But don't tell me this house is worth 200 when all the houses around it are worth 100. That's crazy. Okay? So that's what uniformity is. And remember, anything that you get, any value you get set at the Board of Equalization level or higher is set for that current tax year plus 2 additional tax years. So that's worth knowing. All right, here we go. Lack of uniformity. Uniformity does not mean exactly the same. You'll probably want to separate land values and improvement values and establish units. They like to talk about units of comparison. Just say this home is very similar to mine. And go back to the points of similarity that we talked about and say it's nearby. It was built in the same year. It has the same bedroom bath count. It has the same square footage. And why is it valued at $100,000 when my house is valued at $200,000? Again, they may bring up, well, that home is not in the same tax neighborhood. Say, look, I don't recognize tax neighborhoods. I'm glad you use that. I wish you well with it, but I've looked at my property description and it doesn't say anything about tax neighborhood. And I got news. When realtors take out home buyers, nobody says, oh, I want to live in this tax neighborhood. That is just a unit of comparison solely for the internal use of the county tax assessor's office. Now, where do we get all this information? Real quickly, because I got to wrap it up. I'm a big fan of Zillow. Zillow has committed tremendous amounts of money in the last couple of years to try to overtake every other competitor in terms of being an information source, and they've just about done it. Now, I still use Realtor.com because they are tied in with the multiple listing services, and they will have more recent data in many cases. I also asked the tax assessor what they are using. You have a right to ask the tax assessor to see all the information that they use to estimate the value of your property for this year. What comparable sales did you use and why? And they have to tell you. Now then they're going to say to you, well, what'd you come up with? You should keep your mouth shut. You're saying to them, we're playing poker, please show me your hand. And they have to show you their hand, just like this. And then they're going to say, hey, would you show me your hand? And you're going to be real excited and say, oh, yes, I found several comparables that I'm very proud of. Don't give them that information until you're ready to negotiate with them. Okay? If you can find a realtor who is a member of the multiple listing service, and by the way, don't call me because I am not a realtor. I am a licensed broker, and I have many friends who are realtors, and I respect the realtors, and the organization's fine, but I'm not a member. So don't call me. But most realtors are members of FMLS and Georgia MLS, and those people can do what's called a CMA, or a competitive market analysis, easily and very inexpensively. And don't feel bad about calling your local realtor and asking the broker if there's somebody in that office that would be willing to perform a competitive market analysis for you, because you're thinking about selling, but you're not at all certain what your plans are. Now that's fair. I think about selling every day, but I'm not at all certain what my plans are. You can also ask a broker to give you in writing a broker's price opinion. Now, I had a fellow investor who told me one time that they went in to a Board of Equalization meeting with nothing more than a broker's price opinion, and it was just a letter saying, to whom it may concern, I have examined the value of this property, and I think, in my opinion, the price ought to be this amount. And that's called a broker's price opinion. And if you can get somebody to write that letter for you, I would take that in. Now, it's not the same as an appraisal. It's just not. So don't fool yourself into thinking that this is the same as an appraisal. An appraisal is performed by a licensed appraiser in the state of Georgia, and that's the only people that can do appraisals. Agents are not allowed to do appraisals. Brokers are allowed to submit brokers' price opinions, and members of the multiple listing service or anybody can give anybody else a competitive market analysis, which carries much less weight than an appraisal. What would you pay for a CMA? Probably nothing, maybe a trip to McDonald's for the value menu. What would you pay for a broker's price opinion? Maybe 50 or 100 bucks. And remember, it doesn't carry a lot of weight, but it's more valuable than your word, probably, at least in the eyes of the people at the Board of Tax Assessors and the Board of Equalization. And then finally, if you're willing to spring for an appraisal, and you're probably talking about, I don't know, what are we talking about here? I'm guessing it's going to start at $500 and probably go up from there. That's a lot of money. And in most cases, it's probably not worth your investing $500 in an appraisal in order to try to lower your taxes. If you have a recent appraisal, by all means use it, especially if it's in your favor. But if you don't, I'm not sure I'd pay for one. Okay? The goal in value is to find and present at least 3 comparable sales that support a lower value than the assessed value, and to discredit the county's comparables as less comparable and not indicative of market value. Those are the phrases, those are the hot button phrases I want you to learn. When the county assessor brings in a comp that's 3 miles away and they say, well, it's in the tax district, in the tax neighborhood, say, well, I don't know what a tax neighborhood is, but I know it's 3 miles away, and that makes it less comparable and not indicative of the value of the subject property. That's just all there is to it. Sorry. And remember, this does not need to be in any way combative. You're not trying to discredit. I'm really worried about using the word discredit here. I think I would rather use the word counter. How about that? Counter. There, I like that better. You're trying to show support for a value lower than the assessed value, and you're trying to counter the county's comparables as less comparable. Ooh, that's too many C's. That's the problem with counter. Anyway, not indicative of market value. But I don't want you to think that this thing is a competitive or it gets hateful. You've only got 10 minutes before the Board of Equalization. You've got plenty of time when you're working with the county. But if it looks to them like you've got some comps that are really going to work in your favor, they're going to want to settle with you rather than go before the Board of Equalization. If you can find a foreclosure resale or a short sale at a super low price, you can cut your tax bill in half. But those are few and far between. So I mention them in passing. Look to see what you can find. What's the payoff? Well, with good comps and REO resales, you can cut your tax bill in half. Values are typically not reset but once every 3 tax years. So if you can get past this year, then I think it's best not to object again for the next 2 years. If you can get the value low, keep it there for 2 more additional years. The greater the overall value of your holdings, the more you have at stake. So if your house is worth $1 million and my house is worth $100,000, obviously you can afford to spend as much as 10 times as much as I can and still make the effort cost effective at lowering your property taxes. Okay? So we do have some new Georgia tax laws I just want to cover again. The first one is this. The notice of assessment has to say in writing that all records and data used to determine the assessment are available at the assessor's office for inspection. Now, don't show up the day before April 1st and say, I'd like to inspect, because they're going to go nuts. I mean, they're real busy on certain days. So look at your calendar and don't wait until the last minute. So many real estate investors wait till the last minute, and I wish you wouldn't. And then remember this, if your property was purchased after January 1st and before the last day to file, which is April 1st, then the new owner has appeal rights and can file a return of value. That's not, April 1st is for the property tax return, but the appeal deadline is 45 days after the notice of assessment was mailed. So as long as the 45 days has not run its course, if you buy the property, you have a right to appeal, and I would, especially if the purchase price was less than they're saying the property is worth. Okay? Any type of recording is allowed, blah, blah, blah. There's a new definition of arm's length bona fide sale, and it includes distress sales, short sales, bank sales, or voluntary sales at public auction. However, a foreclosure or a sale under power of attorney is not considered an arm's length transaction, and that's because it's not. Okay? It's property being taken away by the law. Fair market value is defined now as amount paid by a knowledgeable buyer and accepted by a willing seller for a property and an arm's length bona fide sale. Now, that's not the same definition that we started with. This is the state definition. I gave you the appraiser's definition, which I like better, but nonetheless. And there's also a part of the law that says the income approach to value must be used in determining fair market value if available. We talked about uniformity. Let's talk about the income approach to value for just a second. The income approach to value, I thought I had that in these slides. I'll come back to that before we get done, because it's really not applicable to residential real estate, even if it's rented. So, for example, in this neighborhood, look, all these homes were built at exactly the same time. They all have more or less the same square footage. They all seem to have just about the same floor plan. That's easy to estimate value. It's impossible to estimate the value of this property. First, you'll never find a comparable sale, not for thousands and thousands of miles. And so what would you do? Well, this is a real good example of looking at the cost approach or the replacement approach. Some buildings are so unique and are for such a specific purpose that the only way to estimate the value is what would it cost to rebuild it if it burned down. And you start talking about sticks and bricks. So obviously today, if you had a State Farm insurance policy on this and it burned to the ground, and by the way, I think, Margie, isn't Biltmore on something like 10,000 acres? It's a massive tract of land. Well, if the building burned to the ground, what would you be left with? Well, everybody calls it Biltmore Estate and Gardens. You'd be left with the gardens and vineyards and 10,000 lots of land. And the land does not go away. So this is where we first separate the value of the land from the value of the improvement. This is the improvement, okay, this structure. And if it burns to the ground, they're not going to pay you, insurance is not going to pay you for the land. So we would estimate the value of the land, which is very hard to do, and then we would try to estimate the cost of replacing this. And of course, it's irreplaceable, but it can be done. And I'll bet you dollars to donuts, and I may be wrong, that the owners of Biltmore Estate and Gardens have some sort of insurance policy on this structure that will allow them to build it back just like you see it if it burns. That would be a mess, but you've got to do it. You can't go uninsured. I mean, you can, but it's certainly poor stewardship on your part. But who's to say that a lightning bolt won't strike this, start a fire in here, and they would have a massive, here's the grand staircase right here. They could have a fire, start here, bolt of lightning strikes it, the fire spreads to the staircase and goes all the way down the staircase before the fire department puts it out, okay? You're not going to have to rebuild the whole building, but you are going to have to rebuild some remarkably expensive woodworking and custom all manner of stuff here, and it's going to be very expensive. This is where the cost approach, or what we call the replacement approach sometimes, to value comes in. Under the income approach, we talk about the value of an income stream. And the reason that you should discount, even if you have a rental property, if anybody says, well, we need to look at the income approach to value, for starters, if you're getting less than 1% of the value in rent every month, then by all means, introduce the income approach, because it will work in your favor. So, for example, you've got a house that you know is worth $150. They're claiming it's worth $100, but you've only got it rented for $795 a month. Well, tell them that the typical gross rent multiplier in residential metro Atlanta is about 10 to 1, or 100 to 1. 100 is the gross rent multiplier. And so you want to multiply 1 month's rent by 100 and get the value. At 795 times 100, that's $79,500. They want to bring that into the game, fine with you. But the reason that that the income approach is not indicative of market value is that the 95% of buyers do not buy houses for rental income. Now, you and I are part of a rare breed of people that buy houses for rental purposes and long-term appreciation. We are buy and hold investors. At least I hope you are, because that's where the money is. And so if you have a single-family house in a neighborhood that is predominantly owner-occupied, and they try to bring in income approach to value, and it's not going to help your case, you should dismiss it by saying the income approach to value is not applicable in this case because 98% of this neighborhood is owner-occupied. In other words, nobody is coming in here buying a house for the purpose of renting it. In fact, the only reason I'm renting it is that I bought it years ago. I got a really bargain price on it. It's gone up so much in value. Now I can't afford to sell it because of the taxes. And I can't afford to keep it because of these property taxes. But if you start looking at income approach, you're going to see it's hardly paying its own way. That's my response. If they say, okay, what about the replacement method? Well, the replacement method is inappropriate to apply to a neighborhood of crackerjack little houses, and yours happens to be a rental, because you're not going to replace exactly what's there. I'll tell you another area that they use the replacement method. Have you ever been into a church sanctuary? We got a lot of church sanctuaries in Atlanta. Margie, how many church sanctuaries would you guess?
Boy, I can't imagine.
I would guess probably 1,000, maybe more. I'm just guessing 1,000 sanctuaries, but no two are alike, and they don't sell on the open market very often. Now, once in a blue moon, you'll see a congregation decide to move, and they will sell their church, usually to another congregation. I mean, it has a very, very limited market. Does the average home buyer look at churches when they're thinking about? No. It's a very specialized use. Consequently, you're not going to have any comparable sales. In that case, they are going to use, and nobody ever rents a church. You don't rent a church. Instead, a church is a place of worship, and it has a very specialized purpose. And so, in order to ensure it, we use the replacement approach, or the replacement method. The income approach is appropriately used in an apartment complex where hundreds of units are there. They're all being used for income. They were built for that purpose. It's also used in commercial real estate. But it's not appropriate in a primarily residential area. So, folks, I've gone over. I apologize. Make sure you get a letter, if you can, from a realtor on their letterhead stating, I have examined this house, and in my opinion, it's almost worthless. Well, don't say that, but make sure it supports your estimation of value, and I think that'll add a little bit to it. And good luck, folks. That's all I can tell you. That's what value is. Remember our 3 approaches to value, and I'll go right back to them if I can find them here real quick, because I want you to make sure you stress them. Doop, 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 doop. There they are. The comparable sale method, that's what I want you to really focus on. The replacement or the cost method, which is inappropriate and does not apply in residential real estate. And the income method or the income approach to value. And it does not apply to a predominantly owner-occupied area because people don't buy homes there for income, typically. And that's the name of the tune. Stick to those. Use terms like this value is indicated or not indicated, and less indicative of value or more indicative of value. And you're liable to have very good luck when you go in to meet with the county tax appraiser and then later with the Board of Equalization. Good luck, and that's the end of number 4, Module 4 in our series. I hope you liked it. Shoot me any questions to customer care at money99.com, and we'll have our next segment next week. Thanks, folks. Bye.